Welcome to the August garden checklist video. We do one of these each month. They've been going on a little over 3 years, and so if you want to go back and see the others, we were probably a little more detailed back toward the very beginning about what kind of anyone could do in the garden, and we've kind of narrowed it down to what we're doing here in the garden in Raleigh, North Carolina during these individual months. August is interesting here. You know, I'm shooting this video this morning and it's a very, very muggy, close to 80-degree morning. It's not even fun early in the morning, you know, to come out and be working out here. So, you know, understanding that, you know, as we're going through this list, just be careful working out here in the kind of heat that we have this time of year. Again, it's super humid here, and then it burns off and, you know, gets, you know, well into the 90s every afternoon. But we still plant things here and there, and I actually have a lot of things on the soon-to-be patio back here that we're in the process of figuring out where we're going to plant. And some of these hardy shrubs, we'll put them in the ground during the months. I mean, today is actually weirdly cloudy for some portion of the day. You know, I would probably dig a hole this morning and put this azalea in the ground and not really think about it. This is a new variegated encore azalea, Autumn Moonlight. I just got my hands on my first one, and it's blooming here in August. And I would definitely put this in the ground. The things I don't kind of want to put in the ground at this point, you know, sometime in August, I'm going to close the window on marginal things. So I wouldn't be planting things that are potentially barely going to survive your winter anyway as we get toward fall, because they just don't have enough time to get roots under them before, you know, they get slammed with that first winter. Also, I'm not a giant fan of planting grasses toward fall or dividing grasses toward fall or grass-like plants. So I wouldn't pop my Everillo Carex up out of the ground right now and divide it, you know, and then put them back in the holes, because that loosened soil is going to hold some moisture. And while it's not growing in the winter, it can't do anything with that moisture, and they tend to rot. Not always, but a lot of them tend to rot by fall planting. So I'll wait until we come out of winter and do any of those marginal plantings and grass divisions, a lot of my perennial divisions, that kind of thing. Just not, and especially in my clay soil. Holly's back here visiting. She figured out a long time ago how to be on the right side of the camera. The other thing to think about here is that there are summer flowering things. I'm going to have a summer flowering shrub video coming up. There's a ton of, not a ton, but there are some shrubs that will linger well into late summer and even start blooming in late summer or fall that I want to put into a video for things to think about, where you can still have some color even on shrubs in your garden and not just on, you know, perennials and annuals and that kind of thing. Also, a lot of the fall things are probably going to be arriving by the end of August, of course, you know, at your local garden center. So a lot of your fall blooming anemones, fall blooming asters, fall blooming sedums, those kinds of things you'd probably be able to find at the garden center that time of year. And those are nice to acquire because they keep your garden kind of even the whole season, rather than having the big bloom out in the spring and then nothing. We really spent a lot of time out of town during the month of July. Didn't end up getting my tomatoes staked up as well as I would normally like. The vegetable garden's a little out of control. There are a lot of things in this garden that are just a little out of control. Not terrible, but they need a little control added. So there'll be going to be a few videos in the next few days just showing how, you know, I'll attack some things pretty aggressively here in the late summer to make sure that some things aren't being harmed in the garden. If I continue to let things grow together, you know, some harm could come to some things that I really are either slow to recover or are permanent pieces in the garden versus something that's not. But with that said, there are a lot of tomato flowers and a lot of tomatoes out here, and I mean a lot of tomatoes. We're just because of a very cool spring, starting to get some harvest on our tomatoes, and now you can, I don't know if you'll be able to see through here, but there are a lot. We do quite a few different varieties. One of the main things with any of your vegetables, we've got eggplant out here that is looking good, peppers, cucumbers, tomatoes, is to keep picking. You want to make sure that this plant doesn't think that it has set seed, because its potential it'll slow down, because its life exists to produce seed. To get up in the summertime, flower, produce seed and then kind of slow down and go back to sleep. Tomatoes and peppers are actually perennial plants. They're annuals for most of us across the country, but in further south, they're perennials, and they would probably go through a process of wanting to get to sleep to make sure they can come back up the next year, not knowing it's about to freeze and kill them here. But anyway, keep picking. And that is the key to kind of continuing to harvest. At this point, I'm probably just not going to do anything with any of the stuff that's going on out here. I needed to desucker them a long time ago. I should have done a little bit more staking on them. But somehow here, because they're so spread out and they are up high enough, I'm getting enough air movement across them. They don't really have any issues at all. I'm kind of lucky. Normally, I'd like to not have them be bushy like this. So I feel pretty fortunate about that. I would do it differently if I could go back a month for sure. But again, keep harvesting. Here's the other end of the tomato screen. It's again, kind of crazy, out of control. We've got some very interesting varieties out here. And again, finally starting to get some tomatoes. I think there'd be more out here than we could possibly eat at this point. We have saved some room in the vegetable garden to do a second round of a few things. So if we wanted to start some more cucumbers, eggplants, anything we want to start at this point. We have a long fall here, so we would be able to finish, anything we wanted to. The other thing you could be starting some seed for would be things like cosmos or zinnias. You could have a second round of those. I'm about to actually pull out a few of my giant zinnias in the front. I could put some in right now. It's only, shooting this right at the end of July. We would have plenty of time all the way through October for those to be in bloom. Another one to definitely consider is marigolds. I think a lot of mums get bought in the fall that are bred to be annuals anyway. And so if you're buying, a mum on a table for for whatever amount of money it's going to be, you can do marigold seeds or just buy small bedding plant marigolds and put those in. They're the similar colors, and they're actually a lot more cold tolerant, believe it or not, than those chrysanthemums. I've had no problem with minor frost on marigolds in the fall, especially if they're new, vigorous ones. So keep that in mind. I meant to do this video as kind of 10 things we were doing in the August garden. And so now we're up to number 4, and the other things were 1, 2, and 3. You can see all the bees on the salvia back here. We've got a blend of several different salvias around this area. Some are perennials, a lot are annuals. We're going ahead and ordering our seed for next spring right now, and I think there's still shortages of things. I mean, there's still sold out things on a couple things that I want that I'm hoping become available before the end of summer so that we can get them ordered for next year. The other order we've placed already is our bulb order from Color Blends. So I got on top of that real quick. They bring their site up now, and you can pre-order, and then once they know what they're going to have, they add everything to the site, and then things start selling out really quickly, and then they ship them at the time that it's appropriate to plant them in your area. If you're getting them, some of the things need to be pre-chilled, and they'll chill them for you, or you can chill them yourself, but they'll send them out to you at the time that they're best to go in the ground in your area. But again, we've had a seed shortage, and so again, I think 3 years in a row now we've ordered our seeds 6 months in advance, and I'd rather do that even if I got a seed that was stamped 23 instead of 24. I'd rather get it now, even if I lost a little bit of germination rate in that 6 months or whatever. I'd still rather have them on hand. We have a couple tomatoes back there that are just at the top of the list, and if you've watched any of our vegetable garden videos, I've named those. I'm not necessarily going to name a favorite one right now because I haven't ordered it yet, but watch the videos, and I've said it many times on the channel, and I think several of you are growing it as well. But anyway, order seeds. Number 5, like I said, there's going to be a few videos this week in the garden here, just trying to get a few things under control. So there's several different types of pruning or cutting on the plants that I might consider at this point. One is we'll deadhead some of our annuals. So there's some of our annuals like pentas and angelonia that are in this group that you'll notice the flowers come out, open up, and the pollinators are all over them. And then all of a sudden, the flowers actually linger, the color lingers, and the pollinators are gone. And there's just a period of time after the nectar's gone, but the flower is still looking good. As soon as we see the pollinators drop off of these, we come through here and prune the top of them, which is what just happened with these pentas, and left some of the younger ones that were newer flowers in place. So that's one type of pruning you would do. You would just do some deadheading of some old flowers. We'll do a little bit of rejuvenation pruning on some of our annuals. So we've got some things that have gotten a little taller than we'd want to get, maybe, or they're not as full as we would like, or they're kind of floppy still. We can cut those back, and what we'll do on our annual borders is we'll cut about a third of them at the time so that we're not taking all the flowers away from the pollinators. So it's like a third once a week, take a third back. Again, we're gonna have ours out here until mid to late October, so we can continue to do this. If you have a shorter season, you may not wanna do that by late August if you're in the north, in zone 5 or something, because you're just gonna run the clock out and they're not gonna grow back very quickly. But for us here in the south, we can definitely still be cycling through pruning our annuals a bit. Again, I'm gonna do some rescue pruning this week. And so anything in here that looks like it's damaging something else, I've got to cut back just a bit. I'd like to create a little bit of air movement in between them as well, so no late season diseases, as this humidity's really built here in the late summer. I don't want any of those problems. But I don't do any general pruning on my flowering shrubs. You really need to know what you have in order to prune it. You can go in and take off dead, spent flowers, like off hydrangeas or something like that, just right under the flower. But don't do any more general pruning than that. Most of your pruning on your shrubs can all be done after they flower. Each individual plant flowers, or knowing what type of shrub it is, you might be able to do some pruning right now, but you just need to look it up and make sure you know what it is before you're pruning it. Here's a bed where the impatiens got way bigger than were anticipated. The white impatiens, it was fully white, but it was eating everything else that was in the mix. So these were just recently cut back, but they're on their way back out, starting to bloom again. Weeding, number 6 is definitely continuing to weed. And again, I've said this in the past, you don't have to tackle this as like a daytime, all-day job. Just go out early in the morning and pull a few, enjoy the space some as well. I had a bee try to land on the back of my hand. But there's things like crabgrass here that if we don't get them out, they're gonna seed themselves. And crabgrass is particularly good at making seed, and it can make thousands and thousands of seeds. So ultimately, I'm trying to get these things out of here so that I can kind of lower the seed bank. We want to get the roots if we can, but I want to lower the seed bank. That's a seed that germinated, and then I didn't allow it to make a seed. I'm down 1, right? But I don't want to be up 1,000. That's the main thing I'm trying to avoid. There's some self-seeding annuals out here that I'm also in the process of taking out as well. Most of these pull, very easy, and I'll just pull them and leave them in place. There's no real reason to have a bucket or have any kind of other work. If you dislodge the weed from the ground in 90-degree heat, it's dead. It's pretty good. It's pretty good as long as it's not tucked up under something. If you can get it out and get a little sun on it, it'll die that day. But any weeding that you need to do, you do need to stay on top of it, because these things, even though they're annual weeds, they're going to die when it gets cold. The amount of time I have between now and my first frost is going to allow them to do a lot, and I mean a lot of seeding. Other than pruning and insects and diseases, probably the next biggest question I would get this time of year would be watering. Watering can be a bit confusing during the summertime. Believe it or not, a lot of our shrubs out in the landscape have kind of gone into a semi-dormancy. They're not doing a whole lot of growing for the most part, so they don't probably need, especially established shrubs, as much water as you may think they need, unless you're in some place like the desert Southwest, where it's you have very, very, very low humidity taking water out, and then you're going to definitely be watering a lot of these ornamental shrubs on a schedule pretty much. But here in the southeast, it's so humid this morning. There's really a shrub that's been in the ground out here, or a small tree that's been in the ground out here for 2 or 3 years, when it's humid like this, is not going to need very much ongoing water from you. The only things I'm really thinking about watering out here right now is if I was trying to maintain a lawn, that's going to need some additional water, because again, it's growing, right? It's always growing, especially in the heat of the summer. Then warm season grasses. Then our perennials, which are still producing, out here producing flowers. There's a dahlia here, there's a butterfly bush there, they're producing flowers. This crepe myrtle, woody tree, but still producing flowers. If it's doing something for you in the garden, it's probably using water to do that thing. So that would be, that's going to be annuals, flowering perennials, any kind of flowering shrub that's still flowering, or if you're seeing something really flushing out, or if it's newly planted this year, you're going to want to continue to monitor it and to maintain it. But we don't do the watering that we've done in the ground has been very limited in the last. In fact, I got the lowest July water bill. Or it's half of June into July. It was literally almost half of what it was last year. So the amount. A couple things happened. One is it rained a few times, super helpful, right? And the other thing is a lot of these shrubs, we're just not going around and thinking about them anymore. We're just thinking about the annuals and the perennials and the things we're trying to get color out of. And then of course the containers. The containers are always going to rely on you. So this beautiful container with the crepe myrtle and the sweet potato vine and the tricolor sage and it's just looking fantastic. It needs water. Sometimes, at this point, this container's so big, it's still moist right now. I got watered yesterday. I'll just flip them up and, we can see the color in there. It's still, the soil's really dark. And if it's still moist all the way up to the top of the container, you can bet it's super moist down toward the bottom of the container. Make sure your containers have holes in them so water can get out of the bottom of them and try to elevate them on the ground. This one is not, because I just shot it in a video the other day. I'll get it back where it belongs soon. But watering your containers, and some of your containers, if your containers get to the point where you're having to water them maybe twice a day, like you're watering them in the morning and you're coming home for dinner and that thing needs water again, it may be time to pot those things up into a slightly larger container or divide a couple things out of that container, or in the case of a hanging basket, maybe put it in a slightly larger basket. You can get them pretty inexpensively from a garden center. If you bought it as a 10-inch hanging basket, you can get a 12-inch pot, 12 to 14, whatever. And that will save you a lot of watering for the next few weeks as we get toward the end of the season. And it will also give room for new roots, which will push new growth and give you new flowers. I talked about pruning the annual borders a bit, and this ageratum would definitely be on the list for that, for rotating through this border and cutting it back some. We don't deadhead our perennial flowers out here that set seed. So things like this powwow white coneflower, any coneflower we have out here, the Mexican sunflowers, the tithonia, I could go on and on, literally any of our native perennials that set seed out here in the garden. We're not deadheading those because we have a lot of goldfinches out here, and this is goldfinch food. As these flowers fade, what that becomes is food for goldfinches, and they are, we scared them off walking in here just then. So back to pruning, not pruning those. Number 8 is fertilizer. And nothing in this garden has been fertilized since you guys saw me fertilize back in March. We did add a little bit of compost as we planted these annuals and these borders, and so that kind of does count as fertilizer, just a different type of fertilizer really. With the exception of because I was so frustrated toward late spring, we had such a cool spring and such cool nights that a few of the smaller growing dwarf zinnias weren't growing as fast as I would like, and I threw out a little bit of fertilizer on those. I doubt it made any difference in how they look at this point, but out of frustration, I did throw out a little bit of fertilizer, but that's it. And that's full disclosure, I don't fertilize very much out here. I think a lot of everything we're doing is putting love into the soil, okay, and then letting the soil take care of the plants rather than thinking about them as top-down feeding all the time. Now, with that said, here at the end of July, beginning of August, if your annual flowers have started to slow down, maybe you didn't add compost earlier in the year, maybe you haven't, maybe there's not enough nutrients there, you can think about fertilizing, your annual plants, your vegetable garden, your containers, for sure. Here this late though in the summer, I would avoid any perennials, shrubs, trees, any of those things. We don't want to push any new growth on those things because as the days get shorter and the nights start to get cooler and toward the end of August and into September and October, these things need to wind down naturally. So avoid fertilizing any of those things if you can. But again, if you're not getting everything you want to get out of your hanging baskets, your flowering containers, your annual borders, your vegetable garden, go ahead and throw out another round of fertilizer. But I want you to think in the future about the soil being the fertilizer and not needing so much of the things people are trying to sell you. I think I'm up to number 9, and this is one we talk about pretty frequently, is journaling your successes and I don't want to call them failures, but things that maybe underperformed for you for whatever reason. We have a couple go-to tomatoes for sure, and then we'll have maybe one or two that we'll keep from this year's rotation, and then we'll try a few more next year. I want to write that down because I definitely won't remember it. There's no possibility that I'll remember. I might remember my favorite 2 tomatoes, but I'm not going to remember the 2 that I want to keep around for another year as we rotate through them. But going out and spending some time that's not back-breaking, pulling weeds and sweating in the garden and mowing grass, to just walk around early in the morning or in the evening with a piece of paper and just say, I liked that color combination. Maybe this one needed to be in front of this one, that kind of thing. For us, I mean, we've got things so crowded in here. Guys, you've watched the channel long enough, you know how crowded things are in here. And we're going to have to make some adjustments. We're going to have to move some things around. We're going to have to make some decisions on a couple of things aren't going to make the cut going forward from this garden. It's 0.19 acres, and it's pretty full. And there's some other things I even currently have in containers that I would like to put into this garden. So there's going to be just some kind of, some thought on what it is that doesn't make the cut going forward, because we always are just trying to collect plants and interesting things, and maybe we dig something out, we give it to a neighbor and move on. If you have these ongoing problems with a particular plant, and I've said this many times, if you have something that just gets the same problem every year, it might be time to just drop that out of the rotation temporarily. That may help solve the problem. So if there's a particular annual or perennial or vegetable crop that you're having, mosaic virus on cucumbers or something like that, it might be time to just buy cucumbers from a farm stand for a year or two, and then come back in with them or move them to a new area in your garden. But write down all of those things, and so that you can remember them, because I won't remember them for sure going forward. But document successes and failures. Outside of weeding, this list hasn't been the get outside and do hard work list, because definitely, I mean, again, take care of yourself when you're outside this time of year. Number 10, and there's going to be a bonus number 11 coming, so don't go anywhere yet. Using those notes about your successes and things that didn't go properly. I don't want to call them failures. Things that didn't go like you expected. Planning, for fall and for spring. Thinking about, again, there's things available out there that will bloom well into the fall, no matter where you are in the country, and that can be, fall anemones and sedum and asters and even shrubs like caryopteris. We've got some Camellia sasanquas back here that will start blooming in the fall. We've got Camellia japonicas that will bloom after that. There's always something out here that's either going out of flower or coming into flower, and it's because of a lot of planning went into that. So your fall planning, spring planning, summer planning, winter planning, just thinking through that you can have a garden that looks pretty good. I did a consultation with someone the other day, and they were all in on pollinators, and I'm all in on pollinators too. As you can see from this garden, there's a few flowers out here. But when all of these annuals are torn out, after our first frost, and all the perennials have died back to the ground, we've got some things in this garden that hold it together through the winter. So if you came here, after all the stuff gets pulled out, we'll probably put a thin mulch cap in here just to have it be decorative. But there's lots of evergreen shrubs here, or shrubs that have interesting bark or interesting texture, interesting habits. There's conifers. There's things here. So as I was doing that consultation, I was like, thinking, what is this going to look like in the wintertime? Because I think it's kind of important, no matter where you live, that you're thinking about your garden as a 12-month thing to enjoy, and not just that kind of peak 90 days or so. So there's number 10, one bonus. Bonus number 11 is mapping where your perennials are. And we did the same thing back after our early spring blooming bulbs bloomed, is to go and make sure that we knew where they were before we started planting shrubs and perennials and trees and the other things we've planted this season, to not dig our bulbs up. It's just as important, especially if you're doing any kind of fall planting, to know where these perennials are as they start to die back to the ground. Again, on these coneflowers and these liatris and this Mexican sunflower and other things here, we're leaving them up even though they've slowed down, because again, the finches are out here just, they're going after these seeds big time. It's their, I love having them in the garden. They're very difficult to photograph. They're the first thing to fly away as soon as they see any, oh no, something's coming. But as these things die to the ground, we're going to want to know where they are for next year. It might be that we want to come in here and put some sort of conifer like I just talked about in number 10, putting something interesting in here that will make this bed more of a year-round bed. And I don't want to dig something up out of the ground when I do that. So there you go. There's the things we're thinking about in August, and it's less physically demanding than some of the other lists where I'm talking about mulching or, you know, planting lots of things or starting, you know. Toward the end of the month, you definitely want to be starting your fall vegetable seeds. That just popped into my head. Toward the end of August, we'll be starting our fall vegetable season if you're following along with the channel. If you're going to do any fall cool season vegetables, make sure you're ordering those seeds sooner than later. That one just popped right in there before the end. Thanks for watching.